Okay, so continuing with the example that we started in course video 7, this is course video 8. I have copied out this is ULR, which stands for unit labor requirement, and W is wheat and T stands for tomato. So from that example, the unit labor requirement in the wheat industry in the US was 1 hour of labor per pound of wheat, and the unit labor requirement in the tomato industry in USA was 2 hours of labor per pound of tomatoes. And I want to draw production possibility curves, and these are going to look different than the ones you probably saw in Principles of Micro, because this is the constant cost case. And what I mean by that is that we have specified that it takes a certain amount of labor to produce wheat and tomatoes in the two industries, and that it doesn't vary. So costs do not change. And even though they may not have told you this in Principles of Micro, you were actually working with an increasing cost case. So the constant cost case is going to look a bit different. We're going to have linear production possibility for curves. I'll just remind you what the PPFs, do you remember these production possibility frontiers or curves from Principles? You remember this? Well, they don't look like this until chapter 4, when we make the assumption of increasing costs. So for now, we're in a constant cost world. The amount of labor used in each industry is stable regardless of the amount of the good that's produced. So a production possibility frontier tells us the maximum combination of two goods that can be produced given existing technology and existing resources. And we know what our technology is essentially, because we know how much labor is used to make each good in each industry. So we have that, but we do need to know what our resource constraint is. Because labor is our only factor of production, our resource constraint will be expressed as an amount of labor. And I'm just going to make up a number that's nice and easy. Let's suppose that it's 100L, that each country has 100 units of labor to work with, just for simplicity. And we'll plot the production possibilities frontier for the two countries right now. So let's go over the US. We said they've got 100 units of labor to work with. What if they only made wheat? Let's say they don't make any tomatoes at all, and they're only going to make wheat. The question is, what would be the most wheat they could have if all their resources were devoted to the wheat industry? Well, that would be 100 divided by 1, which is of course 100. So if they only made wheat and had no tomatoes, they could have 100 pounds of wheat. And then the other extreme might be that they could put all their resources, which is that 100 units of labor, into the tomato industry, in which case, I'm just sketching this out, if you put 100 units of wheat into the tomato industry at 2 hours per pound of tomatoes, as you're probably imagining, the most tomatoes you could ever make in the US if you made no wheat is 50 pounds of tomatoes. And then, of course, you could have some combination. For example, you could put some of your labor into the wheat industry, and you could put some of your labor into the tomato industry, so something in between. So as you can imagine, I could tell you what these are, but we won't do that right now. Okay, so let's just quickly check the slope of this, because that turns out to be interesting. The slope, of course, is rise over run. This is a negative slope, so we have 100 divided by 50, so the slope is -2. We'll just keep track of that. And then we go over to Mexico and see what they can do with their 100 units of labor. I forgot to say countries here, finish that off. So if Mexico put 100 units of labor into the wheat industry, given that the unit labor requirement in wheat in Mexico is 2, then the most wheat that they could produce would be 50 pounds of wheat. Alternatively, they could put all their labor into the tomato industry and produce no wheat, in which case with a unit labor requirement of 1 in the tomato industry, the most tomatoes the Mexicans could produce, provided they had no wheat production, would be 100 pounds of tomatoes. So I can draw their production possibility frontier over here. Let's drag this over. So you're starting to get the idea that the production possibility frontiers give us some ideas about who's got the advantage in what.